Sarah Martinez had been shooting since she was 8 years old. Her father, a retired Marine, taught her on their family ranch in Texas, where the nearest target was often a prairie dog at 400 yards. By the time she turned 16, she could consistently hit a quarter at 600 yards with her father's old hunting rifle. What started as weekend bonding time became something much more significant. The military recruiter who visited her high school barely glanced at her when she approached his table. Sarah stood 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed barely 120 pounds soaking wet. Her long brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and boots like most of the other students in rural Texas. Nothing about her screamed soldier to the recruiter's trained eye. "You thinking about college programs?" he asked, assuming she was interested in educational benefits rather than combat roles. "I want to be a sniper," Sarah said simply. The recruiter looked up then. Really looked at her for the first time. He saw determination in her green eyes that reminded him of some of the toughest Marines he'd served with. Still, he had to be realistic. "The military has many opportunities for women," he began carefully. "Support roles, intelligence, communications." "I said I want to be a sniper," Sarah repeated. "I can outshoot anyone in this county. Probably anyone in this state." It wasn't bragging. Sarah had won every shooting competition she'd entered since she was 12. Local law enforcement officers brought their rifles to her family's ranch when they needed to qualify at long distances, because Sarah could coach them better than their instructors. She understood ballistics, wind patterns, and atmospheric pressure the way other teenagers understood social media. 6 months later, Sarah stood on the yellow footprints at Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Paris Island. The drill instructors screamed at everyone equally. But she noticed the extra attention she received, not because she couldn't keep up, but because she kept surprising them with what she could do. During the initial rifle qualification, Sarah achieved a perfect score with the M107. The range instructor, a grizzled staff sergeant with 20 years of service, walked down to her firing position and examined her target through binoculars. "Where did you learn to shoot like this?" he asked. "My backyard," Sarah answered honestly. The staff sergeant studied her for a long moment. "You interested in Scout Sniper School?" Scout Sniper School was legendary for its difficulty. The dropout rate hovered around 70%, and no woman had ever successfully completed the program. The physical demands were brutal, the mental pressure intense, and the standards unforgiving. Most of the men who attempted it were already proven Marines with combat experience. Sarah graduated boot camp ranked first in marksmanship and applied for Scout Sniper School immediately. Her request was denied twice before a colonel who had reviewed her scores personally approved her application. Even then, her company commander pulled her aside before she left for training. "Martinez, I'm going to be straight with you," he said. "Nobody thinks you can do this. The physical standards won't be lowered because you're a woman. You'll be carrying the same pack weight, running the same distances, and meeting the same requirements as men who outweigh you by 60 pounds. "Good," Sarah replied. "I wouldn't want it any other way." Scout Sniper School began with 43 students. Sarah was the only woman. On the first day, the instructors made it clear that they weren't interested in making history or proving points about gender equality. They were there to train snipers. Period. The physical training nearly broke her. Carrying an 80-pound pack on 20-mile hikes left her legs screaming. The obstacle courses designed for men with longer reaches and greater upper body strength pushed her to find different techniques, creative solutions that used her smaller frame and flexibility to her advantage. But it was on the shooting range where Sarah truly belonged. While other students struggled with the mathematical complexities of long-range shooting, calculating wind drift and elevation adjustments, Sarah's calculations were instinctive. She understood how a bullet would behave in flight the way a pianist understands which keys to press. The instructors began to notice. Staff Sergeant Williams, the lead sniper instructor, watched Sarah consistently achieve first-round hits at distances where other students needed 3 or 4 attempts to find their target. During night shooting exercises, when even experienced shooters struggled with reduced visibility, Sarah adapted quickly to thermal scopes and night vision equipment. "How do you compensate for temperature variations at night?" Staff Sergeant Williams asked her during one evening session. Sarah explained her mental process, how she factored in not just the current temperature but the rate of cooling, how air density changes affected bullet trajectory differently at various distances. Her explanations were clearer than the textbook, and other students began asking her for help. This created its own problems. Some of the male students resented being shown up by someone they initially saw as an experiment in political correctness. During field exercises, a few tried to sabotage her equipment or give her incorrect information about wind conditions. Sarah dealt with it quietly, checking and rechecking her gear, relying only on her own observations and calculations. The culminating exercise of Scout Sniper School was a week-long field operation. Students were dropped in pairs at different locations with a mission to reach an observation point undetected and engage targets at varying distances. Sarah was paired with Corporal Davis, a former infantry Marine who had made no secret of his belief that women didn't belong in combat roles. "Just try to keep up," Davis told her as they prepared to move out. "When this goes sideways, I'll handle the real work." They moved through dense forest for 3 days, avoiding detection by instructors playing the role of enemy forces. Sarah's smaller size became an advantage as she slipped through underbrush that caught at Davis's larger frame. Her patience during observation periods exceeded his, and her navigation skills kept them en route when his compass readings led them astray. On the 4th day, they reached their firing position, overlooking a valley where targets were positioned at distances ranging from 400 to 1,200 meters. The exercise called for each student to engage 5 targets in a specific sequence within a time limit. Wind conditions were challenging, with gusts shifting direction every few minutes. Davis went first. He was a solid shooter, hitting 4 of his 5 targets. The miss came at 900 meters, when a wind gust pushed his bullet left of center. Still a respectable performance that would earn him a passing grade. Sarah settled behind her rifle, a M40A3 with a powerful scope. She spent several minutes observing wind indicators, grass movement, and heat mirage patterns. The instructors emphasized that patience was a sniper's most important tool, and Sarah had learned to trust her observations over pressure to hurry. Her first shot struck a 400-meter target dead center. The second, at 600 meters, was equally precise. At 800 meters, she accounted for a wind shift that Davis had missed, adjusting her aim point and delivering another center hit. The 1,000-meter target required more complex calculations, factoring in the increased bullet drop and wind drift at extended range. Her shot hit slightly right of center, but well within the scoring zone. The final target sat at 1,200 meters, near the maximum effective range of her rifle and ammunition. At this distance, the bullet would take nearly 2 seconds to reach the target. Time for wind conditions to change multiple times along the trajectory. Sarah observed for a full 3 minutes, noting how vegetation moved at different distances, identifying wind patterns that weren't visible from her position. She made her calculations, adjusted her scope settings, and controlled her breathing. The trigger press was smooth and straight back. Through her scope, she watched the bullet impact exactly where she had aimed. A perfect center hit at a distance where many experienced snipers would be happy just to hit the target. "Outstanding," Staff Sergeant Williams said simply. Of the 43 students who started Scout Sniper School, only 14 graduated. Sarah finished 3rd overall and 1st in marksmanship. The Commandant of the Marine Corps personally presented her with the Scout Sniper certification, making her the first woman to earn the designation. But graduation was just the beginning. Sarah's first deployment took her to Afghanistan, where she joined a reconnaissance team conducting surveillance and target interdiction missions. Her team leader, Gunnery Sergeant Peterson, was initially skeptical about having a female sniper in a combat zone. "This isn't the rifle range, Martinez," he told her during their first briefing. "Out here, people shoot back." Sarah proved herself quickly. During her first 3 months in country, she recorded 17 confirmed kills, all at ranges exceeding 600 meters. Her teammates began to appreciate not just her shooting skills but her other contributions to their missions. She was an excellent observer, patient, and detail-oriented in ways that complemented the more aggressive instincts of her male counterparts. Her reputation spread throughout the Marine Corps, and eventually reached other special operations units. When her deployment ended, Sarah received an unusual invitation. A Navy SEAL team commander requested her transfer to support their operations. It was almost unheard of for Marines to work directly with SEAL teams, and absolutely unprecedented for a woman to be assigned to special operations units. The transfer process took months of paperwork, security clearances, and evaluations. Navy and Marine Corps officials debated whether existing regulations allowed such an assignment. Medical examinations, psychological evaluations, and fitness assessments were repeated multiple times. Throughout the process, Sarah continued training, knowing that if approved, she would be joining the most elite military units in the world. SEAL Team 6 operated at a level of secrecy and sophistication that exceeded even her previous special operations experience. Their missions were classified at levels that required additional clearances. Their training standards were brutal, designed to push already elite soldiers to their absolute limits. When Sarah finally reported for duty, she faced a new challenge. Unlike her Marine sniper school experience, where she had eventually earned grudging respect through performance, the SEALs viewed her as an outsider on multiple levels. She wasn't Navy, she wasn't a SEAL, and she was a woman joining a brotherhood that had never included females in operational roles. The team commander, Lieutenant Commander James Harrison, was professional but distant during her initial briefing. He explained that she would be supporting their operations as a designated marksman, providing overwatch and precision fire support during missions. She would train with the team but wouldn't participate in the same selection processes that SEALs endured. "You're here because you can shoot," Harrison said bluntly. "That's it. Don't expect to be treated like one of the team until you prove you belong." The SEAL team members were polite but standoffish. They included her in training exercises but excluded her from the informal gatherings where real team bonding occurred. Sarah understood their perspective. These men had endured Hell Week, survived the brutal selection process that eliminated most candidates, and earned their trident through shared suffering and mutual dependence. She was being assigned to their team without going through the same trials. Training with the SEALs was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. Where Marine operations emphasized firepower and aggressive tactics, SEAL missions required stealth, precision, and adaptability. They practiced close-quarters combat, underwater infiltration, and urban warfare scenarios. Sarah's role was always the same: provide overwatch from a concealed position and deliver precise rifle fire when needed. During one training exercise, the team practiced clearing a building, while Sarah provided cover from a rooftop 800 meters away. The scenario called for her to eliminate simulated sentries before the team approached, then watch for threats during their assault. Using paintball ammunition to maintain safety during training, Sarah consistently hit her targets, while the SEALs moved through their objectives. "Nice shooting," Petty Officer Ryan Cooper told her afterward. It was the first compliment she had received from any team member. Cooper was a veteran SEAL with multiple deployments, and a reputation as one of the team's best marksmen. If he acknowledged her abilities, it carried weight with the others. Gradually, the atmosphere began to thaw. Team members started including her in tactical discussions, asking her opinion about sniper positions and angles of fire. But full acceptance would require more than training exercises. It would require combat, where theoretical skills became matters of life and death. Sarah knew that until she proved herself under fire alongside her SEAL teammates, she would remain an outsider, a skilled shooter assigned to their unit, rather than a true member of their brotherhood. The opportunity to prove herself was coming soon. Intelligence reports indicated an upcoming mission that would require precision marksmanship at extreme ranges. Sarah began preparing mentally and physically for what might be the most important shooting of her career, knowing that her performance could determine not just mission success but her future in special operations. As she cleaned her rifle that evening, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From a teenager shooting prairie dogs on her family ranch, to a Marine Scout sniper to supporting the most elite naval special warfare unit in the world, each step had required proving herself again, demonstrating that gender didn't determine capability. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to show that she belonged among warriors who accepted nothing less than perfection. Sarah Martinez was ready for whatever came next. The mission briefing came at 0400 hours on a Tuesday morning in October. Sarah sat in the secure conference room alongside 8 SEAL team members, studying satellite imagery of a compound in the mountains of Afghanistan. The target was a high-value terrorist leader who had been coordinating attacks against coalition forces for over 2 years. Intelligence indicates that Mahmoud al-Rashid will be at this location for a meeting with regional cell leaders, Lieutenant Commander Harrison explained, pointing to the aerial photographs. The compound sits on a ridge at 8,200 feet elevation, surrounded by open terrain that makes direct assault extremely hazardous. The photos showed a cluster of stone buildings, surrounded by walls and guard towers. The compound overlooked a valley on 3 sides, with only one approach road winding up the mountainside. Any vehicles attempting to reach the location would be visible for miles, and the elevated position gave defenders significant advantages. The plan is a simultaneous helicopter insertion at 3 locations, Harrison continued. Alpha Team will establish an observation post here, 2 kilometers north of the target. Bravo Team will position for direct assault from the east. Charlie Team, that's Martinez and myself, will occupy high ground to the west for overwatch and precision fire support. Sarah studied the terrain carefully. The western position, Harrison indicated, was a rocky outcropping that would provide excellent fields of fire, but required a difficult climb to reach. More importantly, the distance from that location to the compound was significant. "What's the range from the western overwatch position?" she asked. "Approximately 2,800 meters, Harrison replied. The room fell silent. Even for expert marksmen, 2,800 meters represented an extreme long-range shot. At that distance, factors beyond normal ballistic calculations became critical. Earth's rotation affected bullet trajectory. Temperature variations at different altitudes influenced air density, humidity, barometric pressure, and multiple wind layers could push a projectile dozens of feet off target. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Webb, the team's senior enlisted member, spoke up. "That's nearly 2 miles. Even with perfect conditions, that's beyond the effective range of standard sniper rifles, which is why we're bringing the M107, Harrison said, referring to the Barrett 50 caliber rifle system. 50 caliber ammunition maintains sufficient energy and accuracy at extended ranges. The M107 was a massive weapon, weighing nearly 30 pounds loaded. It fired 50 caliber bullets that could penetrate light armor and maintain lethal force at distances exceeding 3,000 meters. But the rifle's size and weight made it challenging to transport and position, especially during covert operations requiring long approach marches. The mission timeline is tight," Harrison continued. "Intelligence suggests the meeting will occur sometime between 1,400 and 1,600 hours. Weather reports indicate clear skies but afternoon thermal activity that could affect long-range shooting. Wind speeds are forecast at 15 to 20 knots, with gusts to 30 knots. Sarah made mental notes about the environmental conditions. Thermal activity created heat mirage that distorted target images at long distances. Variable winds required constant adjustment of aim points. Shooting in mountainous terrain added complexity because wind patterns could change dramatically with altitude and terrain features. Chief Petty Officer David Rodriguez, the team's communications specialist, raised a concern. If Martinez is providing overwatch from 2,800 meters, radio communications might be problematic. The terrain could block line-of-sight transmissions. "We'll use relay equipment positioned with Alpha Team," Harrison replied. "They'll have visual contact with both the target compound and Charlie Team position." After the briefing, team members dispersed to prepare equipment and conduct final training. Sarah spent the afternoon on the firing range with the M107, familiarizing herself with the massive rifle's characteristics. The weapon's recoil was substantial, requiring careful positioning and follow-through to maintain accuracy. Its scope was powerful enough to clearly identify targets at extreme distances, but also sensitive to environmental factors that affected image quality. Petty Officer Cooper joined her at the range, carrying his own sniper rifle. "You ever shot anything that far before?" he asked as they set up targets at 1,000 meters. "My personal best is 1,847 meters," Sarah replied, adjusting the M107's bipod legs for stability. "Combat shot in Afghanistan. Different rifle, though. Lighter bullet." Cooper nodded approvingly. Many snipers never attempted shots beyond 1,500 meters, and fewer still achieved hits at such distances during actual combat situations. Sarah's previous long-range success indicated she understood the complex calculations required for extreme distance shooting. They spent 2 hours practicing with the M107, engaging targets at various ranges up to the maximum distance available on their training facility. Sarah's accuracy was impressive, but she noticed differences in bullet behavior compared to the smaller rifles she typically used. The heavier, .50 caliber projectile was less affected by wind, but took longer to reach distant targets, increasing the time available for conditions to change. The bullet flight time at 2,800 meters will be about 4 seconds, Cooper observed after watching Sarah's shots. Lot can happen in 4 seconds. Sarah understood his meaning. If the target moved during those 4 seconds between trigger press and bullet impact, even a perfectly aimed shot would miss. Long-range sniping required patience to wait for the right moment when all factors aligned: environmental conditions, target position, and shooter readiness. That evening, the team gathered for final preparations. Equipment was checked and rechecked. Communication procedures were reviewed. Contingency plans were discussed for various scenarios that might develop during the mission. Sarah felt the familiar pre-mission tension that combined excitement with nervous energy. Petty Officer Webb approached her during equipment preparation. Webb was an experienced SEAL with multiple combat deployments and a reputation for speaking his mind without concern for diplomatic niceties. "Martinez, I want to ask you something straight up," Webb said. "What makes you think you belong on a mission like this?" The question hung in the air between them. Other team members continued their preparations, but Sarah sensed they were listening to the conversation. This was the challenge she had been expecting since joining the team, the direct questioning of her qualifications and capabilities. "The same thing that makes any of us belong," Sarah replied calmly. "Training, experience, and the ability to do the job. See, that's where I have problems," Webb continued. "The rest of us went through Bud S. We earned our trident the same way every SEAL has for decades. You got assigned here because you can shoot. That doesn't make you one of us." Sarah felt the weight of the entire team's attention now. This conversation would define her relationship with the unit going forward. How she responded would determine whether she gained their respect or remained an outsider tolerated only for her marksmanship skills. "You're right," she said. "I haven't earned a trident. I'm not a SEAL. But I'm here because this mission requires someone who can make an extremely difficult shot under combat conditions. The question isn't whether I belong among SEALs. The question is whether I can do what the mission requires." Webb studied her for a long moment. "And if you miss? If that shot doesn't connect and the whole operation goes sideways because we couldn't get close enough for conventional weapons? Then you'll have every right to question whether I should be here," Sarah answered. "But until that shot is taken, judging my capabilities based on which school I attended or which uniform I wear doesn't serve the mission." The conversation ended there. But Sarah knew Webb's challenge reflected the thoughts of other team members. She was being given an opportunity to prove herself, but failure would confirm their skepticism about women in special operations roles. Success would require not just exceptional marksmanship, but also the mental strength to perform under intense pressure. The flight to Afghanistan took 18 hours with refueling stops. During the long journey, Sarah reviewed topographical maps, studied weather forecasts, and ran through ballistic calculations for various scenarios. The compound's elevation and the Overwatch position's location created a complex shooting geometry that required precise mathematical analysis. At 8,200 feet elevation, air density was significantly reduced compared to sea level. Thinner air meant less atmospheric resistance, causing bullets to travel faster and strike higher than at lower altitudes. However, the same thin air made wind effects more pronounced. as there was less atmospheric mass to stabilize bullet flight. The temperature differential between morning and afternoon could create thermal layers that bent bullet trajectories unpredictably. Sarah had experienced this phenomenon during desert operations, where extreme temperature variations caused shots to impact several feet from their aim points despite perfect calculations. Upon arrival in Afghanistan, the team established a forward operating base at a location within helicopter range of their target. Final intelligence updates confirmed the terrorist leader's presence at the compound. Surveillance drones provided real-time imagery showing increased activity and security preparations that suggested an important meeting was indeed planned. Weather conditions were as forecast. Clear skies with moderate winds. However, meteorological reports indicated a weather front approaching that could bring cloud cover and precipitation within 24 hours. The mission window was narrowing. At 0600 hours, the team loaded into 2 helicopters for insertion. Sarah carried the M107 rifle in a protective case, along with her personal equipment and ammunition. The weight was substantial, but she had trained extensively with heavy loads during her Marine Corps service and SEAL team preparation. The helicopters flew low and fast through mountain valleys, using terrain masking to avoid detection. Sarah watched the rugged landscape pass beneath them, mentally reviewing the approach route to her designated position. The rocky outcropping where she would establish her shooting position was barely visible from the air. A small ledge on a cliff face that would require technical climbing to reach. The insertion point was 3 kilometers from Sarah's overwatch position. She and Lieutenant Commander Harrison would have to cover that distance on foot while carrying full equipment loads, then climb a near-vertical rock face to reach their firing position. The approach would take several hours and had to be completed before daylight exposed them to observation from the compound. As the helicopter settled into a landing zone concealed among large boulders, Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that marked the beginning of combat operations. Months of training and preparation had led to this moment. Everything she had accomplished in her military career, from that first perfect score at Marine Corps recruit training, to graduating Scout Sniper School, to joining this elite SEAL team, had prepared her for what lay ahead. The helicopter's engines wound down as she and Harrison gathered their equipment. In a few hours, she would attempt a shot that tested the absolute limits of human marksmanship capability. Success would validate her place among the military's most elite warriors. Failure would raise questions about women's roles in special operations that might affect future generations of female service members. But as Sarah shouldered her pack and checked her rifle case one final time, she felt the calm confidence that came from thorough preparation and proven ability. She had never missed a shot when it mattered. And she didn't intend to start now. The mission clock was running. Somewhere in the mountains ahead, a terrorist leader was planning attacks that would kill innocent people. Sarah Martinez was the only person positioned to stop him, and she would need to do it with a single bullet fired across an almost impossible distance. The helicopter lifted off behind them, disappearing into the darkness, and leaving Sarah and Harrison alone in enemy territory with one of the most challenging missions in special operations history. The approach march took 4 hours through treacherous mountain terrain. Sarah and Lieutenant Commander Harrison moved carefully over loose rock and steep inclines, following a route that kept them concealed from the compound while leading to their overwatch position. The M107 rifle added significant weight to Sarah's pack, but her smaller frame allowed her to navigate tight spaces between boulders that would have challenged larger team members. By 0300 hours, they reached the base of the cliff face that led to their shooting position. Harrison studied the rock wall through night vision goggles, identifying handholds and safe climbing routes. The ascent would be technical, requiring ropes and climbing equipment while carrying full combat loads. "You ready for this?" Harrison asked as they prepared their climbing gear. Sarah looked up at the cliff face, barely visible in the pre-dawn darkness. The rock appeared solid, offering adequate handholds for an experienced climber. She had learned technical climbing during mountain warfare school and had practiced extensively during her time with the SEAL team. "Let's do it," she replied. The climb took 90 minutes. Sarah went first, securing rope anchors as they ascended. Harrison followed, carrying additional equipment, including communication gear and backup weapons. The M107 rifle case was secured to Sarah's pack with additional straps to prevent it from shifting during the climb. They reached the overwatch position just as the first hints of dawn appeared on the eastern horizon. The ledge was exactly as described in their intelligence briefings. A natural platform about 6 feet wide and 12 feet long, offering excellent concealment behind rock formations while providing clear fields of fire toward the compound. Sarah immediately began establishing her shooting position. She unpacked the M107 rifle and set up its bipod on the most stable section of the ledge. The rifle's massive size required careful positioning to ensure it would remain stable during extended observation periods. She arranged camouflage netting to break up the weapon's outline while maintaining clear sight lines to the target area. Harrison established the communication station and began checking radio contact with other team elements. Alpha Team reported successful insertion and movement to their observation post. Bravo Team was in position for their assault approach. All elements were ready for the operation to commence. Charlie Team in position, Harrison reported over the tactical radio network. Overwatch established. Target area under observation. Through the M107's powerful scope, Sarah could clearly see the compound, 2,800 meters away. The morning light was improving visibility, revealing details of the buildings and defensive positions that had been obscured during their night approach. Guards were visible on the compound walls, and vehicles were positioned near the main building. She spent the next hour studying the target area through her scope, familiarizing herself with the layout and identifying potential targets. The intelligence briefing had included photographs of Mahmoud al-Rashid, the terrorist leader they were targeting. Sarah memorized his facial features and general appearance, knowing she might need to identify him quickly during the operation. Environmental conditions were changing as the sun climbed higher. Temperature was rising, creating thermal currents that would affect bullet trajectory. Wind patterns were shifting as mountain air heated and began to circulate differently. Sarah made continuous observations of wind indicators throughout the valley, noting how vegetation moved at various distances between her position and the compound. At 1,000 hours, increased activity became visible around the compound. Additional vehicles arrived, and more personnel moved between buildings. Intelligence reports confirmed through radio communications that the expected meeting was beginning to develop. Multiple vehicles approaching from the south, Alpha Team reported. Count 6 SUVs with armed escorts. Sarah watched the convoy through her scope as it wound up the mountain road toward the compound. The vehicles were heavily loaded, suggesting they carried important personnel for the planned meeting. This was the moment the operation had been designed to intercept. Stand by for positive identification of primary target, Harrison instructed over the radio. The convoy reached the compound at 1,130 hours. Sarah observed through her scope as passengers disembarked from the vehicles. Most were armed men, wearing traditional Afghan clothing, but she focused on identifying the specific individual they had come to eliminate. At 1,147 hours, she saw him. Mahmoud al-Rashid stepped from the lead vehicle, exactly matching the photographs from their intelligence briefing. He was a tall man with a distinctive beard and wearing a dark vest over traditional robes. Sarah centered her scope's crosshairs on him as he walked toward the main building. Positive identification of primary target, she reported to Harrison. Confirmed, Harrison replied, after viewing the target through his own spotting scope. All elements. This is Charlie Team. Primary target identified and under observation, but al-Rashid disappeared into the building before Sarah could take a shot. Intelligence had indicated the meeting would last several hours, providing multiple opportunities for engagement. Sarah settled into a patient observation mode, maintaining visual contact with the compound while monitoring environmental conditions that would affect her shot. The wind was becoming problematic. Mountain thermal activity was creating unpredictable gusts that shifted direction every few minutes. At 2,800 meters, even minor wind variations could push a bullet several feet off target. Sarah needed to time her shot for a moment when wind conditions were stable and predictable. At 1,320 hours, movement resumed around the compound. Personnel began emerging from the main building, suggesting the meeting was concluding. Sarah prepared for engagement, checking her rifle's settings and reviewing her ballistic calculations. Target movement observed, she reported. Preparing for engagement. Alpha Team confirmed they also saw activity around the compound. Bravo team reported readiness for their assault if the sniper shot was unsuccessful. Everyone understood that Sarah's long-range shot was the preferred option, but backup plans were in place if needed. At 1,334 hours, Al-Rashid appeared in the compound's central courtyard. He was speaking with other men, gesturing toward vehicles being prepared for departure. The target presentation was excellent. Clear background, good lighting, and the target stationary for extended periods. Sarah began her final preparations. She controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate to minimize movement of her rifle. Her calculations indicated a holdover of 47 inches above the target to compensate for bullet drop at 2,800 meters. Wind drift would require holding approximately 18 inches to the right of her aim point, assuming current wind conditions remained constant. But just as she prepared to engage, a radio call changed everything. "Charlie team, this is Alpha," came the voice of Chief Rodriguez through their communication system. "We have a problem. Thermal imaging shows additional personnel moving through the compound. Count at least 30 armed individuals, more than intelligence estimated." Harrison studied the compound through his spotting scope. "Confirmed. Significantly more personnel than briefed. The increased number of enemies complicated the operation. If Sarah's shot alerted them to the attack, Bravo team would face a much larger force than anticipated. The element of surprise was critical for their success and survival." "Web to Charlie team," came another radio call from Bravo team's position. "We need positive confirmation that Overwatch can eliminate multiple targets if needed. Our approach is exposed if they organize defensive fire." The pressure was mounting. Sarah understood that her teammates' lives might depend not just on her ability to eliminate the primary target, but potentially on engaging multiple threats at extreme range. Through her scope, she could see armed guards positioned throughout the compound who could direct devastating fire at Bravo team's assault route. "Charlie team to all elements," Harrison replied. "Stand by for sniper engagement. Overwatch has clear shot on primary target." But Sarah heard something else in the radio traffic, a tone of doubt that she recognized from previous conversations. Some team members still questioned whether she could perform under this level of pressure. Whether a Marine assigned to their unit could deliver when SEAL lives hung in the balance. Webb's voice came over the radio again, this time with a question that cut directly to the heart of those doubts. "Charlie team, confirm Overwatch capability for precision engagement at this range. Can Martinez deliver, or do we need to abort for close assault?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah felt the weight of every conversation, every skeptical look, every moment when her teammates had questioned whether she belonged among them. This was the test Webb had essentially promised during their equipment preparation. Prove you belong, or accept that you don't. Through her scope, she could see Al-Rashid clearly. He was standing in the center of the courtyard, surrounded by armed guards, presenting a clear target. Wind conditions had stabilized momentarily. Her ballistic calculations were precise. Every technical factor supported taking the shot immediately. Sarah made her final adjustments to the scope settings. She controlled her breathing, finding the natural respiratory pause that provided the steadiest shooting platform. Her finger found the trigger's sweet spot, applying steady pressure straight back toward her shoulder. The mathematics of the shot were complex beyond normal comprehension. The bullet would travel for 4.2 seconds before impact, climbing to nearly 400 feet above the target before beginning its descent. Earth's rotation would deflect the projectile slightly eastward. Atmospheric density variations at different altitudes would affect the bullet's ballistic coefficient. Temperature gradients would create air currents that could push the projectile off course. But Sarah had spent years mastering these calculations. Her mind processed dozens of variables simultaneously, arriving at firing solutions that combined scientific precision with intuitive understanding developed through thousands of practice rounds. She knew exactly where to aim to place her bullet on target. "Taking the shot," she announced calmly. The M107 rifle's recoil was tremendous, driving back against her shoulder with enough force to shift her entire body position. The muzzle blast was deafening in the confined space of their rocky position. Through her scope, Sarah watched the target area as her bullet flew downrange toward its intended destination. For 4.2 seconds, The outcome remained uncertain. Had her calculations been accurate? Were wind conditions as stable as she had estimated? Had the target moved during the bullet's flight time? Then she saw the impact. Mahmoud al-Rashid collapsed instantly, struck center mass by the .50 caliber projectile that had traveled nearly 2 miles through challenging atmospheric conditions to reach him with lethal precision. The terrorist leader who had orchestrated attacks against coalition forces for years was eliminated with a single shot. Chaos erupted in the compound as guards reacted to the sudden death of their leader. Some scattered for cover. Others searched the surrounding terrain trying to identify the shooter's position. Their confusion provided the perfect opportunity for Bravo Team's assault. "Target eliminated," Sarah reported. "Primary target is down." "Holy shit," came Webb's voice over the radio, professional composure momentarily abandoned. "Confirmed target elimination at 2,800 meters. Overwatch has eliminated primary target." Bravo Team launched their assault immediately, taking advantage of the confusion caused by the sniper fire. With their leader dead and organization disrupted, the compound's defenders offered less coordinated resistance than expected. The assault team secured the objective within 20 minutes. "Outstanding shooting, Martinez," Harrison said as they began packing their equipment for extraction. That was world-class marksmanship under combat conditions. But the real validation came through the radio, as team members reported their status after the successful assault. Webb's voice carried a tone of respect that hadn't been present before. "Charlie Team, Bravo Team, sends compliments to Overwatch. That shot just saved American lives today." The extraction proceeded smoothly, with helicopters recovering all team elements without casualties. During the flight back to base, Sarah reflected on the mission's significance. She had achieved something that few snipers ever attempted: a successful combat engagement at nearly 3,000 meters under challenging conditions, with lives hanging in the balance. More importantly, she had answered the question that had followed her throughout her military career. From Marine Corps recruit training through Scout Sniper School to assignment with SEAL Team 6, people had wondered whether she belonged among elite warriors. The question wasn't about gender equality or political correctness. It was about capability under pressure, when failure meant death. Back at base, mission debriefing confirmed the operation's complete success. Intelligence gathered from the compound provided valuable information about terrorist networks throughout the region. The elimination of Mahmoud al-Rashid disrupted planned attacks that could have killed dozens of innocent civilians. But for Sarah, the most meaningful moment came when Webb approached her during equipment cleaning after the mission. "Martinez, I owe you an apology," he said. "I questioned whether you belonged on this team. That shot today answered every question I had. You didn't just perform under pressure. You delivered when everything depended on it." Other team members echoed similar sentiments. Cooper, who had been one of her early supporters, smiled as he cleaned his rifle nearby. "Welcome to the team," he said simply. Lieutenant Commander Harrison included Sarah's performance in his official mission report, noting that her precision marksmanship had been critical to the operation's success and had directly contributed to saving American lives. The shot was officially recorded at 2,847 meters, making it one of the longest confirmed sniper kills in military history. Word of Sarah's achievement spread quickly through special operations communities. Other elite units requested her support for missions requiring extreme-range precision fire. Military marksmanship instructors studied her techniques and ballistic calculations. Her success opened doors for other women seeking roles in special operations units. Years later, when new personnel joined the SEAL team, they would hear the story of the Marine sniper who silenced doubters with a single shot fired across an impossible distance. The question of whether Sarah Martinez belonged among America's most elite warriors had been settled definitively on a rocky ledge in the mountains of Afghanistan. She had proven that belonging wasn't about which school you attended or what uniform you wore. It was about delivering when everything mattered most, when lives hung in the balance, when failure wasn't acceptable. Sarah Martinez had delivered when it counted, and in doing so, she had earned her place among warriors who accepted nothing less than perfection. The 2,800-meter shot from the M107 had indeed settled it. Sarah Martinez belonged exactly where she was,